Okay, so what we are looking at here today is going to be the Radiomaster Zorro, and this one is the Express Solaris edition. And probably yours might look a little bit different because this one was heavily modified. You can see that the original gimbals was replaced to the AGO one, and these are probably the best gimbals that you can buy if you have the money. I think these cost about $79 or $99 per set. So yeah, these are all metal CNC, so they are very good. And the second modification that was done on this Radiomaster Zorro was the extra large battery Lion packs. A lot of people generally complain about the original small batteries doesn't have enough juice to last the radio for a full day, and this is going to resolve it because you're going to have endless power with this, and probably you won't have to charge it for weeks. Okay, so let's go back to the topics, and in this video, basically, I'm just going to give you a crash course of how to get started with this radio completely if you just don't know what to do at all. All right, so we're basically going to go over the ports and tabs and basically the power button. We're going to do the simple setup, and also I'm going to teach you how to get it bind to your drone the first time. All right, let's get going. Okay, so before we begin the setup, let's look at what are the hardwares of the Radiomaster Zorro. The first thing that is probably going to jump to you is going to be these two gimbals. So if you're in the United States, most likely you will have a Mode 2 switch. And what that means is this one here, up and down, is going to be your throttle. And left and right here is going to be your yaw. Up and down here is going to be your pitch. And left and right here is going to be your roll. And let's flip it here. So these are the main switches that probably if you fly at PV, you are going to use these switches a lot. So I personally, these 4 switches is more than sufficient for me to use. So I'm generally just going to talk about these. And if you wanted to use these, you can, but I generally just do not use them that much because normally if you fly at PV, you just need an arm switch, a mode switch, and probably a GPS switch and a turtle mode switch. Of course, you can set up more, but personally, I only use this 4. So the second set of buttons we're going to review are going to be whatever that is controlling the radio itself. So it's not going to be related to controlling your drone, but to setup purpose. So it's the first one is going to be the system button right here, and the second one is going to be the model button right here. We're going to dive into deeper later, but I'm just going to give you a summary right now. So to understand this easily, whatever that is on the top portion, these are generally going to be what relates to controlling your drone, and whatever it's on the bottom, these are going to be whatever that is relating to set up your radio. Okay, so done with these buttons and things, and let's look at the ports. So the most important ports if you're just starting up is going to be on the top. This is the USB-C cable that you might want to know where it is, because this is the one. If you wanted to use your radio for simulators, this is the port you wanted to plug it into. Okay, so at the bottom there is also a radio. There's also a USB-C port right here, and this one is just dedicated for charging. It doesn't do anything. So the top one, you can use it for simulator, or you can just use it for data transfer. All right, done with this. Let's just power it on so we can go through additional stuff. Okay, let me do it again. So I want to show you something. So if this is the first time you're opening up, you probably want to set your switches back to every places. Otherwise, it's going to give you like a warning. And what you have to do is, if you're seeing a throttle warning, just make sure you put the throttle back. And if there's a switch warning, make sure you put the switch to the original location. Okay, so with the brief guide as of how to select stuff and set up stuff, basically you have 2 menus as we previously mentioned. You can go into the system button, and you can also go into the model. And if you needed to go back, you can use the return button right here. And if you wanted to select anything that is like vertical like that, you can use the, is this vertical? Yeah, vertical, yes. You can, if you want to select thing that is vertical, you can use the little scroller right here. And then if you wanted to select it, you just basically give it a short press and you can go in. And if you wanted to return, you basically press this button right here. You basically short press and it should exit. And if something happens, you can just long press and it was just going to exit from the page and the page and the page to the the main menu right here. So let's go back to the system again. And if you wanted to select the pages, as you can see, there is total 7 pages right here. You can use the page button to jump right around, and you will be able to use your scroller button to move horizontally. So this is the basic setups. Okay, so the system button basically manages all whatever that is the utility in the radio. So the radio itself, kind of like the basic setup of the radio. Okay, so done with the system button, let's go into the model button just to make a look. So same, you can also use your scroller button to scroll up and down to select models, and you can go in. You can use the page button to go around and use the return button to go back. So very simple. So obviously, I'm not going to go right into these two because it's going to be very boring. So if you wanted to know more about this, we will have a little session at the bottom to actually explain a little bit more about the essential pages that you need for these two menus. But for now, I'm just going to teach you how to get this binded to your EOLAR's drone so you can get in the sky right away. All right, let's get going. Okay, so to get your drone bounded, there is going to be two types of drone that we're going to work on. But first thing, we're going to start with the radio side. So at the radio side, you are going to go to the Models tab. And at the Models tab, you are going to use the scroll button to scroll your models onto the first one. If you just receive it, it should be default setting right here, okay? So it shouldn't be on the other ones. But for me, I will have to set the one for X on the number 5 because I set my settings on number 5. So what you're going to do is to use your scroller to hit number 1 and you're going to select the model. Just make sure it's right there. But yeah, since my settings on number 5, I'm changing it back to number 5. Okay. After selecting the model, you are basically half done. Next, all you have to do is you are going to go to the system tabs. So you use the return button to go to the previous page, press the system button, and you're going to go into the ExpressOLS Lua script. Okay. So in the ExpressOLS Lua script, you're going to make sure you set up the packet rate at 500 Hertz because with this one, you will be able to bind with both type of receivers. You can bind with the SPI base and the serial base receiver. So telemetry ratio, I generally don't touch it. I leave it as default. For the switch modes, just leave it on a hybrid. So the model matching depends on your setting on your drone, on your receiver. So if you don't know what you're going to do, if you have to turn this on and off, I suggest to leave it off. And later on, if you see there's an issue, let's just turn it off. And later on, if you see an issue right here saying that model mismatch, that's when you know that you have to turn on model matching. The TX power tab is going to allow you to adjust your TX power. So I generally just like to leave it at minimum 250. This is the internal module, and the higher it goes is going to be 250. But if you wanted to do really low, it's going to go to 10 milliwatts. But we're just going to leave it at 250. So the next tab is going to be dynamic. So dynamic basically is going to allow the radio to decrease the power and increase the power based on the actual situation of the quad. So if the quad is in the bad reception area, then the radio is going to push the full power, and if it's like perfect reception, then it's going to minimize the power a little bit. So I suggest to leave it on dynamic, and we're just going to go back. As for the VTX administration, I generally don't touch it. And in this crash course, we're not going to go into details of it. So for the Wi-Fi connectivity, just a brief introduction is you can go in here and you can enable the receiver Wi-Fi, or you want to enable the Wi-Fi on your Radiomaster Zorro, and that's when you will be able to connect to your computer and flash the firmware, but this is not in this one. So we're just gonna go back, and right now you are just going to come down here and you are basically going to use the buy button. This is right here. This is going to be where you're going to buy your drone later on. And if you look at down here, if you wanted to know which version of firmware the ExpressOLS has on your Radiomaster Zorro, you're going to see it right here. Basically, most of the HTX radios should have the same thing. So if you have an internal external module, it should all show here. So this is going to be 3.3.1. So this is ExpressOLS 3.x. Okay, so before we begin the binding process, let me just introduce you to the two subjects that we're going to use today. So this one has a SPI-based EOLAR's receiver, and this one has a serial-based EOLAR's receiver. So basically what SPI-based EOLAR's receiver is, it has a little receiver baked into the flight controller, so everything is connected with it. It doesn't have a separate chip. So this one, has a separate ELRS receiver, basically a separate chip soldered to the flight controller, so everything is controlled separately. They both have different binding methods, and we're going to basically start with this one. So the binding rules for these are always going to be the same. So you will have to have the same version of ExpressLRS in order for them to bind. Same version means 2.x equals to 2.x, 3.x equals to 3.x. So for SPI-based ELRS receiver, you have to make sure that your Betaflight firmware, yes, Betaflight firmware need to be on, I believe it's on 4.4 or above. That's basically when you are going to have ExpressLRS 3.x. And as for the serial-based ELRS receiver, you just have to flash it, whatever version that is above 3. So 3.x, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, it's going to be the same. As long as 3, it will work. So we're going to start with the serial-based ELRS receiver first, because this one is a little bit easier compared to this SPI-based. This one requires your computer to set up to go to the bind phrase, or you can also use the bind button if you want, but I generally do not like to use it. So to bind a serial-based ELRS receiver, all you have to do is basically plug and unplug the battery 3 times very fast, and then plug in the battery entirely. This is going to force the serial-based ELRS receiver to enter so-called the binding mode. However, this is just a cheat method, and if you wanted to more advanced method as of using binding phrase, there's going to be a video down below at the description for you to know how to set up both. Okay, so I'm just going to demo it. So if you, in case you just want to go out fly, I'm just going to help you try to get it bounded real quick. And if it doesn't work, go try the binding phrase. It works much better. So what you're going to do, 1, 2, and 3, and number 4, plug in all the way. This should force the receiver to go in binding mode. Okay, so, but obviously, because I already bound it with a binding phrase already, it's already going to be bounded. But if you're doing it completely new, you have to just come here, hit the bind button, and it's going to be bounded together. As you can see right now, you can see that this one, I have a model match setting. So that's when you have to, if you see this message popping out on your Radio Lua script, you have to come to the model match tab, and you are going to have to adjust the model match to on. All right. And that's basically going to fix your problem. Okay, in general, this button, the default button that is on here, the one on the bottom is going to be your arm switch, and this one is going to be your mode switch if you have a default setup. And I believe this one should be your turtle mode. But generally, all you need should be this two to get you in the air. If you wanted to set up the different stuff, that's when we talk about it later. But this is a crash course, which is going to make sure it works. So if you bound it, and you basically can try to flip the arm switch to see if actually the motor actually spins. Okay, so you can see that this is a successful bind, obviously. And if you wanted to do additional setups, I can teach you later, but let's get the binding for these two resolved first. So the next one we will be doing will be the SPI-based ELRS receiver. This one is a little bit more complicated because we will be requiring the computer connection to Betaflight. All right, let's go to the Betaflight and let me show you how to do it. Okay, so once you have arrived at your computer, what you're going to have to do is you're going to basically plug in your quad, your SPI quad with a USB cable. There should be only a USB plug if you're flying analog. And then we are going to switch our view to the computer. And then you are going to go to the Betaflight configurator. If you don't know where to download Betaflight configurator, the link is going to be down below. And what you're going to have to do, you're just going to hit connect right here. You are going to scroll down to the receiver tab, and this one obviously is going to be bounded because I already have a binding phrase set up, and this is also where you can set up a binding phrase if you're interested. So what you have to do, if you don't have a radio receiver, if you don't have it bounded already, what you have to do is just to bind the receiver right here. So when you hit the bind receiver, and at the same time you are going to you're going to hit the binding first, and you're going to hit the bind receiver on the second, and these should be bounded together. Yes, I know the quad is spinning, so let me see that. Okay, so this one, because it does not have model matching, so we're going to have to turn off model match in order for our stick inputs to actually work. Actually, it's not working right now. Okay, let me just unplug it, redo it again. Okay, so for some reason it just lost the connection, but basically that's how you do it. If you hit the bind button at the location, it is going to bind together. So this one we have to still turn the model matching off. And then if we go to the receiver tab, you can see that your throttle, your stick inputs are moving. This is also a way of checking. Okay, so previously I was talking about if you wanted to set up your switches, you can. Just know the setup process is going to be same for serial base and SPI based utilized receiver. You just have to come to the Betaflight mode tab. And basically, if you have your Radiomaster Zorro set up in basically default, this one is always going to be your aux1, aux2, and probably aux3 and aux4. So it's very easy. What you have to do is if you want to set up your ARM switch as this one, you can just come to here and basically put this on auto. And if you wanted to flip it, you can see that, okay, it's actually going here. So which means this is going to be the one you want to set up your ARM switch for, and modes is going to be the same, aux2. Okay. Okay, I guess I didn't set this up. I personally did not set, I guess I did, probably didn't set us up as, so this one, personally I set this up as aux3, but if you have a default radio, this is going to be aux2, okay? So, but if you're not sure, you can always just come to the computer and just use auto and check. Okay, and then flip over crash. This one, what we want is, I wanted to use this one. It's going to be the same setup process. Switch it to auto and then flip the switch. Okay, so this one is not set up. All right, so we will have to use this one. Okay.
GPS rescue.
Okay, so but basically the idea is going to be the same. So if you wanted to use a certain switch, you can. You just have to set it up in your radio as well. All right, basically this is how easy it is to set up the quads and how to bind to both of the quads. Now let's head back to the bench and we can talk about additional stuff that I think you need to know in case you wanted to start being a little bit creative to customize your radio zone. All right, so we're back to the bench, and the next thing we're going to do here is I'm just basically going to show you the pages in the system and models. I'm just going to tell you which one I think it's important that you have to know in advance. For the rest, if you fly FPV, you don't necessarily use them a lot, but I'm just going to give you the important ones that I use a lot daily, so it actually makes sense and talks to you. Okay, so let's start with the system button. So the system button, you already see we already went to the tools page. So basically the one you use here is going to be Express LRS, and you're going to come back here a lot. Okay, and let's switch to page number 2. Basically page number 2 is going to be your SD card information. So the SD card is going to be right here. Whatever you're seeing right here, it's saved on the SD card. So if you remove the SD card, bye, this radio is basically gone. Additionally, these backup file, firmware file logs are also the ones that the actual files that you are going to see on your computer when you actually plug in the SD card. So okay, so done with this one. Generally, if you're here, I wouldn't suggest you touch it if you're new. So let's switch to the number 3 page. So the radio setup, as I was saying, basically the system is basically the thing that generally controls the radio itself. So the radio system setup, basically this is where you can set up the dates and time and battery range, whatever. So when did you want your battery to start beeping to you saying that it's low battery, this is something like that. So dates, I don't generally, I don't care that much because I don't think that's something I care. But if you wanted to set up the correct date, you can. So the modes, this is the important thing right here, is the modes. It's when you switch it to all the switches are going to make a sound, and I absolutely hated it. So what you have to do, I generally like to turn it off to no key so it doesn't beep back on me. Okay, so that's about it. So let's scroll down to the little bit more important stuff. Let me try to remember. Is there something that is more important? Yeah, voice language is English. I think you can also change it to Spanish if you want. Let's try. If it's gonna actually make a difference for my setting. Okay, it doesn't make a difference. Okay, it's not going to speak anymore. Okay. So it still has, it only speaks English per my personal radio. Okay, got it. So matrix. So matrix, in case you want to, so currently it's units, currently is in matrix. If you want to switch to imperial, you can. So the USB mode basically will allow you, when you plug in a USB cable from the radio to the computer, it basically is going to pop out a screen asking you to see if you want to use it as a joystick or as a USB drive. So you can save stuff, start saving stuff on the USB disk. Okay, so here is where you select your modes. Generally, I will leave it at 2 because if you're in the US, this one, the modes 2 is basically this combo that this one is the throttle, this one is your pitch. Okay. Okay, so let me see, scroll down. The rest, I kind of left it as default. I did not play with it. And if you wanted to go test it, you can. As for the global function, I don't typically use it, but if you wanted to use it, you can. And trainer, I leave it just as it because I didn't touch it. So the hardware portion, you can use the stick. This is where you calibrate your stick. So if you wanted to calibrate it, just use the scroller to press the calibration and enter to start. And basically this is how you calibrate your sticks. So set your sticks to the midpoint, move it in there, play the game, and then move the stick pots, do it like this. So don't scroll it like that, but do it like that. And basically when you're done, hit this button and then you are done. So then hit return, go back to the previous page. Whoops. Okay, let's go back to the calibration page. Yeah, so basically at the hardware portion, this is the main function I use. Okay, and the last page is going to be your version, basically what HTX firmware this is on. And actually, let me see. Probably we can still see the module that is here. So you can see that the internal module that is running current 500 Hertz, and basically ELRS, the external module is turned off. So just make sure if you are actually using the internal module, you want to make sure that your external module is turned off. And if you are using external module, make sure your internal module is turned off. You can only turn on one, otherwise you're going to see arrows. All right, so basically this is the 7 pages of the system. All right, after the system page, let's go into the model page. So the model page, the first page is very important because you will actually have to select the one. You have to make sure that you're selecting the one you wanted to adjust, because later all the pages are going to be focused on the one you select. So basically, if you wanted to adjust the Zorro page, as the Zorro model, you have to make sure you select that one. Otherwise, you're still every adjustment you did on the later page is going to be all ExpressLRS. The one says ELRS. So this is what I want. So I'm just going to go into page 2 to see what is there. At the second page, basically this is where you set up your model name. You can set up ELRS. And the rest, I kind of just leave it as default. Okay, so this is on the previous step when I was saying that internal module, external module. This is where you enable internal or external module. So you wanted to make sure that okay, so basically this should be your default. It should be crossfire and it should be 500 Hertz. And these should be left as is, okay? So the external RF is where in case you're having a separate module on the back, then that's when you wanted to enable it. But if you're enabling the external module, you want to make sure your internal module is turned off. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay, so to turn on the external RF, what you have to do here is just basically use your scroller button to give it a short press. Make sure that it's kind of like blinking like that, and you can start choosing which external module you want. So you can see that most of the stuffs are going to be right here. And most likely in the case, you probably will be using a multi or a crossfire, and these are the two you wanted to select. Crossfire basically is ExpressLRS. Okay, so we're turning this off. Okay, the rest, I just left it as default. And let me switch directly to the mixes. Okay. So the mixes tab is basically where you set up all the switches. So as you can see, the channel 1, 2, 3, 4 is basically your sticks inputs like this. It's going to be default on all the models. You don't have to set them up separately. But the ones, channel 5, 6, 7, if you have a complete new model, they are going to be the ones that is leaving blank. And if you wanted to set up these, I have a separate tutorial listed down below. It's going to be the TX12, basically it's going to be HTX radio, so it's going to be the same. Yeah, so you can just check out that video if you wanted to customize these switches. So generally, let me rephrase. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be this, and the rest 5, 6, 7, 7, 8. You can set up all these whatever you like to be on each channel. So channel 5 is generally going to be aux 1, aux 2, aux 3, aux 4, aux 5. It goes up and up. So that's basically it. Okay, so outputs, I left it as default. Curves, I left it as default. Logical switches, I generally also left it as default. The special function is in case you wanted to set up your radio to talk back like you. So if you wanted to, this is the SE switch. I basically ask it to say ARM. So you can see that if I flip it, it's going to say ARM. So the way of setting it up is basically you are going to just, okay, let's return it. You wanted to select the channel you want, but generally, if you have nothing set up, it should be starting from your first page. Most likely, you're going to start from the first one, so I'm just going to use the first one as an example. So make sure the bar is selecting there. Use the scroller button. Just give it a short press, and it's going to the first time. The first one is going to let you enter the selection, and you will be able to select which one you wanted to customize. So if you wanted to use a specific switch, just give it a press, and you can just flip the switch you wanted to use, and it's going to basically select it for you. And once you're done, just hit the return button to go back. Okay, and what we wanted to do is you have a lot of options. You can play music, vario, but generally here you're just going to play tracks. They can do a lot of stuff. And then here we are going to actually select what English font you wanted to read. So it should be armed. And then once you're done, use the return button to exit, and then just flip the switch and it should talk back to you. Okay, so yep. So very simple, and let's go to the page 11 telemetry. I left this as default, and display I also left it as default. All right, so I think these are the basic things that you need to know in case you wanted to fly FPV, and most likely it should be sufficient to carry you off most of your cases. And if you wanted to dig in more, you have additional questions, just feel free to leave a comment or ask some questions, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.